And we're live.
But I'm still a little too close.
You're okay. I mean, you know, you don't have the same setup, but hello, all, welcome. It is Thursday night, Generational Change. I'm Jen.
I'm Peter, and holy Toledo. I just discovered today that apparently there are these major beams underneath the Egyptian pyramids. So I guess the aliens did, in fact, come and build those things. At least that would seem.
Yeah, I saw that in the headline. I did not like that was not something that I was aware of was going to be like one of our news stories today.
Well, it would certainly seem logical. I just think at this point, are the aliens either going to come or are they not? I mean, the whole world is falling apart, Jen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's all and we're really just listen, it was set up this way. I'm just going to tip it over. That's what's going to happen. Everyone wants to blame him, and it's like, no.
No, I'm just getting, you know, I've got so many buckets of popcorn ready to watch this implosion. There's so much, but it wasn't. The pyramids wasn't anything that I thought was like a current event.
Well, I thought for sure that it would be something that could just distract us from all the nonsense that's going on right now, because there's certainly plenty of it.
Okay, yeah, there is.
You know, the more we watch everything unfold with the entire collapse, if you will, of our system, it really is amazing. And I know you insist constantly that, you know, the wagging of the dog is not Israel to the United States, it's the United States to Israel, but
yeah,
you also think it's like one and the same in many respects.
Yeah, well, it's empire. It's American empire. American is right now the current hegemon. So it's American empire. So that's who's in charge of what's going on. I mean, I know people would like to blame Israel, but it's not Israel as a nation that is the problem. It's Israel as a premise that's a problem. See, that's what we're doing this for, is the premise of Israel. Israel is an extension of U.S. empire. It exists because we allow it to exist. And so people think that it is the one calling the shot. No, that's just as much the political facade as the red-blue bullshit in this country. So that's the facade. But at the end of the day, it's the person with the wallet that's in charge. And that's us right now, as far as Israel is concerned. So, you know, people think that we're somehow bowing to them. I think that's an appearance that we would like to, like, that's what we would like to perceive. And if that's what floats your boat in your perception, then, you know, have at it. I don't believe that. I just don't believe that. I am with Larry Wilkerson on this. I very, very much believe that it is American empire and Israel is just, that's our little proxy there.
I don't disagree that Israel is our proxy. We have to control the assets in the Middle East. We've been saying this for how many years now? Over 3 years, that is exactly what the war in Ukraine was all about. It was never about Putin wanting to take over the country. We know that there are trillions upon trillions of dollars in natural resources in the western part of that country. We wanted to get Ukraine into NATO so we can control the assets. It's actually kind of amazing when you think about it. And this is one of the, I would think, true silver linings of Trump being in the White House, is that now all these things that we've been talking about that people couldn't see for so long, it's now wide open, right out.
Oh, he's mask off. He's a mask off kind of guy. And that is what I've always said. He facilitates the revolution.
We're changing the name from Greenland to red, white, and blue land. I mean, at some point, and I guess
that right there, that's caucasity.
Oh, sure.
That is one of the that's a very prime example. When people want to know what is caucasity, that is that's just a little symbol of it. But yeah.
Well, forgive me, audience, and I believe you could forgive Jen as well. I still have not seen Idiocracy, but many have suggested that that was a very foretelling film 20 years ago that showed what eventually was going to happen to our culture and our society. So I don't think it's totally out of step.
We don't really have a culture, and
No.
we really don't have much of a society. And that's the problem. Our entire existence is premised on empire, and empire is might makes right. So all we have in this country in terms of what our culture is, like what we are in the world, is just military bully. Oh, and economic as well. I mean, with
Sure.
sanctions and all that. But I actually think that the rest of the world and BRICS, what they're trying to do, will eventually overcome the money thing. But the fact that we're just military bullies, yeah, it's our time is up.
Well, Jen, Mitchell Starr on Twitter just wants you to go to Gaza and run for office there. Wanted to let you know that message just came in.
I know who that is, right?
Oh, you know him?
I do. And I'm not, that's someone I haven't spoken with since this all started. So, but yes.
This bald-headed jabroni with the glasses?
He's married to someone. He's the husband of someone that I grew up with.
The only thing I can say about him is that he looks exactly like you would expect him to look.
Of course. But I don't want to, that's not neither here nor there.
But I'm surprised that he's cuddling a dog and not a cat, because a guy who talks like that usually is a cat guy.
Let me guess. It's a pug.
Yes, an old pug, but it is.
Yeah, they have an old pug rescue.
Well, that's
that's
funny.
what I'm saying. Like, these are people that
now that's not for a guy who actually knows you personally, and basically he's telling you he wants
I've met him a couple times, right?
Yes, but hold on a minute. A guy who says go to Gaza, that's a person who's saying I hope you get killed. That's what he's saying. Like,
okay,
that's real caucasity right there. I would say.
Well,
throw it on,
so
Jen.
Angry. They're so angry, and they just have no idea what to do with themselves.
Oh, I hope he's watching.
But I don't care. But the thing is this, and this is something that people like that will never understand. They'll never understand this. And I put it up before. We're all Palestinian. I mean that in so many different ways. I mean that actually, literally. For those of you who actually believe that somehow you're Jewish, so you're inherent like to that land. No, you're inherent as far back as the rest of the world is. And the only people that have continuously been there are the Palestinians, which really makes them basically all of our ancestors. That's the cradle of civilization, which is one of the reasons it's so infuriating to me. Again, the caucasity. But yes, so as far as me going to Gaza, the people of Gaza right now wouldn't want someone like me to come there. See, it's only psychopathic people that would wish that and want that for someone. The people of Gaza don't wish that on me. See, that's the difference. That's the difference right there.
And is this guy a North Miami Beach dweller?
I don't know. I think he didn't grow up with, I don't remember him from that. It's someone I grew up with's husband. And I don't, you know what? And it's really just, I'm sure that whole cabal of Zion-Nazis in my former existence have a lot of thoughts and whatever, and that's fine. They are entitled to that. But when you make flippant, ridiculous, vile comments like that, it just shows that you don't understand the substance, the nuance. And that's the problem with brainwashed Zionists. They don't see it. Again, their face is up against the tree, so they can't see the forest. Their face is like this. They need, Mitch, step away from the tree, friend. Step away from the tree. Okay.
You know what's funny? You know what's funny about guys like that? He'll say that to you. He wouldn't dare say it to me, because he knows I wouldn't tolerate it.
No, but it's not as here's the thing. To them, this is why what's one of the things that's going on in Syria is the killing of the ale whites. And that is precisely because the other Muslims view them as traitors to the religion. And so those are the people that they actually hate the most, are their own kind that they view as traitors. And that's the thing about people like this. So they're always going to hate on me. And also it's because I've seen in the kitchen and I know how that goes. And I've exposed a lot of shit and the brainwashing, and their bullshit doesn't work on me. So that's why they go after me. They're more pissed at me than they are at you. That's
Guys,
why.
we have 110 people so far. We've only gotten 42 likes. Please hit that like button if you haven't done it so far. That'll be a big help. Matt is here, but he's not on screen as of yet. Not sure if he's getting his camera set up, so we'll give that a minute just to be sure. Don't want to bring him in on a black screen. Kat Nagarita wants you to know, Jen, we all know a Mitch.
I know. And again, this is someone I've only met a couple of times, like in the past 30 years at a couple of class reunions. It's not somebody that's like, in my life, but I know many of them as well, right? Like it's just symbolic of that. And their whole attitude is just to be mean and nasty as opposed to do a little bit of research. And this is why these people are the most vile people to me. Because, and I've said it before, affluent people and this is someone who's affluent people who have access to information, have time on their hands, and still choose to willfully ignore, thereby being willfully ignorant of things in the world, are especially disgusting to me, because you have access to factual information and you refuse to look at it. That's willful ignorance. See, I know people that are actually ignorant. I've met many actually ignorant people, no shortage.
So
But most people don't willfully avoid knowing something if given an opportunity to know that. And people like this that are affluent and do have resources are doing that. So it's even more disgusting.
Well, you've got a lot of fans, Jen.
Thank you, Foodie. And I will say I had to fire a friend over this a few years back. Back in 2015, I had to fire a friend over being willfully ignorant. I can disagree with people. And what's interesting is if you were to ask that friend, she'd say that it had to do with politics. It had nothing to do with politics. It had to do with willful ignorance. Now, I don't have the thing where my friends all have to agree with me. I have friends that don't agree with me on all sorts of stuff. That's fine. Willful ignorance is unacceptable to be my friend. I mean, you could go through life that way. That's on you. But yeah.
All right, I think Matt may be ready because I saw like a flicker of the camera real quick. There he is.
There he is.
When you think about the boosts that we've gotten over the years to help build our small but mighty channel, there is no one who provided us with a greater boost.
I know.
Single clip than our guest this evening. He's one of my guys because he's in Jersey. So
oh my God.
Did
he go to Rutgers?
I don't think he went to Rutgers, but I'm sure he doesn't dislike Rutgers.
Whatever. I never would have even thought about Rutgers one way or the other until you started talking about it.
Well, not all of us can go to Northwestern, Jen.
I went to the University of Colorado for undergrad, Pete.
Oh, excuse me.
State school.
Matt Taibbi, welcome back to Generational Change.
How are you doing? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. How's it going?
Really
good. I have a new computer. That's why I had a little problem.
It looks like you have a whole new setup.
Not completely new. The neon sign I've had, but no, I changed all my electronics today, so I couldn't figure out which camera I was using. So
no, you're all good.
I appreciate it.
You're a journalist first and foremost, so please share with us, with the audience, what Racket News is all about, what you're currently working on. So your latest article that was written. As Jen and I would both attest to, we both studied journalism in school, and it is a dying industry, unfortunately, for obvious reasons. So we think it's very important that we continue to support real journalists where and when we can. So please, floor is yours. Share what you're currently working on and what Racket News is all about.
Oh, well, thanks for having me back. I appreciate it. Yeah, Racket is just my site. As you know, or you probably know, I worked for Rolling Stone for 15, 16 years. I started off covering presidential campaigns. I had the old Hunter S. Thompson beat when I first got hired, and then I spent about 10 years covering Wall Street after the crash in 2008, and then after Trump got elected, things got a little weird. You might remember there were some there were a lot of changes that went on in the business around that time.
Yeah.
I had some disagreements. It wasn't hostile, but the magazine was going in a different direction with certain stories, particularly the Trump-Russia story, which I didn't have strong feelings about. I just thought they were wrong about it. So I moved to Substack. I was one of the first people to move to Substack back in, I guess it was 2019 or 2020. And what I've mostly been doing, I still do the same kind of like investigative stuff. But I have, the nature of Substack is, as you know, you got to produce more content. And I've mostly been doing, for the last 2 or 3 years, especially, a lot of stuff on digital censorship. I did the Twitter file story, a lot of stuff on kind of the international laws around that. So that's basically what you get a lot of commentary, and we also run things like kind of uncensored footage of protests and some other interesting stuff on the site. A lot of FOIA requests that we just sort of dump out on there. But mostly when I'm working, it's mostly lately on the censorship issue.
Yeah, and for people out there, Matt's talking about the Freedom of Information Act.
Oh, right. Sorry.
I'm just saying, like, I heard FOIA, and I'm like, well, yeah. So this is something that I want to kind of do now with people that are coming on, such as yourself, where it's like we could talk about so many different things, like that you are also aware of. So I kind of want to know, what are your top 3 things that everyone should be knowing about right now, and in no particular order. And if you don't have 3, that's fine. But like, what are the stories that you think are very important that people should be following?
Well, it's funny because I'm in a little bit of a postpartum situation, because I spent years really on one story, which was, I did this Twitter file story, and people probably remember some of the early stuff that came out of that, which was, a lot of it was unfortunately presented as very partisan. While we were doing it, the gist of the story was that the FBI, the DHS, and the State Department, among other agencies, were kind of pressuring the platforms to suppress certain kinds of content. And I thought that was a big story at the time, but it wasn't until we stopped doing the Twitter file stories that we realized there was this whole other angle. Like me and the other people, there were several other reporters who were doing that stuff. And you ask, what's a really important story that most people don't know about? In America, most people don't know that in Europe, they just passed this law called the Digital Services Act, which is a comprehensive, formal censorship law that requires every one of the member nations, any platform that is operating within the EU, all of their content must pass the recommendations of these state licensed content reviewers they call trusted flaggers. It's this gigantic sort of industrial scale censorship and content review law. And what I didn't know until about 5 or 6 months ago was that the United States was in pretty heavy negotiations to be folded into this system. So we were trying to find a way. There were multiple different attempts to try to get the United States on the same page as what Europe is going through. You might have read about, you probably saw that 60 Minutes story where there were cops banging on the door about people who were writing memes and things like that. Essentially, the American intelligence services and the FBI and some other agencies were looking for a way to get the same legal authority. It's just that we have the First Amendment, which makes it difficult for them to do. So that's the big story. I just don't think people really even know what that is, what that law is, and how comprehensive it is, and how close we came to being folded into that. It was a really significant moment in our history. For all the crazy things that the Trump administration might represent, it's very possible that his election forestalled that development, I think.
And I'm so curious, like, this is the kind of thing that people have big plans. Oh, we'll shut that down. How would you, like, there's so many different platforms. There are so many different platforms to have to do. And in a way, though, I feel like they're doing it anyway. They're doing it on all our platforms. We're monitored. I'm censored. We get stuff like, I'll put things in comments and it won't even let it show on the comments, like just constantly being censored. So
Sure.
I feel like, when you say things like, oh, well, we have the First Amendment, I'm kind of thinking like, well, we did. I'm not so sure that we have that, especially given what's going on right now with Mahmoud Khalil. But that's just one of many stories, right? Like, so do we have a First Amendment here anymore?
We do. I mean, I think we do. The Mahmoud Khalil story, if and when that goes to court, the Trump administration is going to lose in that case. That's a straight up viewpoint discrimination case. It's not terribly complicated. I think they'll lose on that.
I hope so, because let me tell you something. To me, the sign of the apocalypse was Ann Coulter and I agreeing on an issue. Like, that happened, and I really needed to, like, make sure I wasn't dead.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, I understand that people feel strongly about the Khalil incident, but what happened with him, that issue was really settled in 2002. This is a Bush era issue, because it was right after 9/11 that we basically made this tiny adjustment it's connected to the Patriot Act. I forget.
I read it.
Yeah.
I read that. Did anybody in Congress read that? Because they sure signed it. And that was signing away 4, 5, and 6, actually, from what I recall. 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendments all kind of went vamoose with the Patriot Act.
With the Patriot Act? Yeah. I mean, there were lots of, yes. And in answer to your question, did the members read it? No, they didn't. I actually, I remember interviewing people on the Rules Committee in the House. The way that Congress works is that once the Rules Committee gets the actual bill, they're allowed to kind of just stuff things in there and then send it to the members the next morning, and then you have like an hour and a half to vote on it. So when the original draft of the Patriot Act went through the final committee, the Justice Department just added about 800 pages of stuff that could not possibly have been read. So most of the people who voted on the Patriot Act had no idea what was in it. But among the things that was in that act were some changes to some other laws, including some immigration laws, one of which does say that a person who endorses or espouses support for a designated foreign terrorist organization can be legally removed from the country, irrespective of their immigration status, and that is the authority that the Trump administration is relying upon. Now, I think in conflict.
It's unconstitutional.
Yes, it is, but that's why they're allowed to do that. They're probably on firmer, because it was passed by Congress, they're probably on firmer ground than, say, the Bush administration was with torture, right? Because that was just a memo that the executive branch wrote to itself. But it is in contrast with the viewpoint discrimination law and the First Amendment. So we'll see. I think they're going to lose on that. But forgive me, I do think it's, even that as egregious as that incident is, it doesn't compare to the gigantic industrial thing that everybody was, like, all around the world was every Western country was basically developing this thing that was formalizing this kind of content review system. And it doesn't really matter which kind of government is in power. That was going to be very scary. I mean, the Europeans are finding out now what that really means. It has incredible breadth. It's really the authority that they from this Digital Services Act that was really the reason that Romania just had to overturn its elections. So I worry about that. Like you ask, do we have a First Amendment? Well, we do. Like the Trump administration may be violating it. What scares me more is when things are legal, right? Like when they can do sort of systematic human rights violations and not even break the law. That worries me more personally. But I understand where you're coming from.
Matt, does it surprise you, even to this day, and with all the access to information that we still have in an abundant capacity as well, just how brainwashed the average American is? I mean, I see you almost for like shits and giggles get into it with certain people on Twitter, but I think it's
Why engage?
Because I think it's a microcosm. Yeah. Well, that's what we said, about certain people. It's like, who takes the time to pontificate about certain things that have no relevance whatsoever? But also when it comes to things like foreign policy, most of the people who are commenting on things like Ukraine, things like Gaza and so forth, I mean, they're coming at it from a perspective where it's either blissful ignorance or it's deliberate ignorance. And I'm not sure which is which. What do you think?
It's interesting. I think there's been, first of all, it's a great question. I think there's been kind of a sea change in how people consume the news. People have been encouraged to comment on things without looking at the background, without looking at source materials. They're very much in the moment. If you read the New York Times now or watch Fox or anything, you're never encouraged to go back and look at the whole timeline of the story. I mean, I forget who I was talking about this with, but in the old days when I was a kid, when you were taught to write an article, the assumption was that the reader didn't know any of the background of any story. So you had to go through everything from the very beginning, because teaching everybody about the basics was part of every story. Even if it was not a significant or big story, you had to go through all that stuff. And what you see now in news is this assumption, I think it's deliberate, where you're only told like a little sliver of a bigger picture, and people get catchphrases about things, and then they just lean into that 100%. Even though they might have only heard it 5 minutes ago, it's like they act like they're complete authorities about it, when really, I'm afraid to weigh in on topics when I don't know absolutely everything about it. Right?
Exactly. Yes, that's how I feel too. Yes,
right?
Thank you. Yes, I research and research and research. That's why I tell people, if I tell you something, it's true. It's because I've done so. Yes, thank you. Exactly that. Otherwise, I bring on people who do know.
Right. And that used to be what you're talking about, used to be the kind of the common denominator for people, in this job, right? Like,
it was journalism 101. And as you can tell, Peter and I haven't really been practicing for a while.
Well, no, but you are, right? Like, I doubt you just sort of, start talking about things that you've never encountered before, and then just riff on them, or do big takes on things, without knowing what you're talking about. But it used to be standard to be terrified of being wrong about things, and that was kind of the dominant emotion, because
like a retraction is like the worst thing ever. Like that would be the worst thing ever, and yet now, not only isn't it not a horrible, they just don't bother.
They don't bother, or right. They make it silent, right? So they don't even, or they don't tell the audience that there was a mistake made.
No, excuse me. We don't make mistakes. We just tell the truth, and it's always the truth and nothing but the truth.
That's a pretty good impersonation.
He does it good, yeah.
I really think it's just an overarching problem, because everybody's focusing on Trump, but in reality, you've got horrifically worse liars in Congress than him. When he lies, everyone's actually looking for. They're like looking under every nook and cranny to see if he's actually telling the truth.
Trump is the most honest liar I've ever seen in my life.
Mm-hmm. Because even if he's telling the truth, people don't believe him, so they're going to investigate. But if Chuck Schumer or Mitch McConnell or Nancy Pelosi or
Adam
DWS,
Schiff, yeah,
Schiff, oh my God, it's like there are people who, and then it becomes very tribalistic. They don't want to question it because if it's going to make their side look bad, then they don't want to get involved. And that, I think, in a lot of ways is why there is this misinformation bull that just has completely seeped into our discourse, and we don't know what to believe. But when it comes to topics that we talk about, that we know about, one of the, I would say, fortuitous reasons you coming on this podcast tonight is a recent Substack you wrote regarding the crisis in higher education in the United States. Now, while everybody's focusing on Trump, obviously doing his part to dismantle the Department of Education, what people are not talking about is that this was an inevitability that it was going to happen. And why is that? For a decade, I ran a fundraising company called Campaign Sports. I worked with college and high school sports teams all over the country, from Division I on down to junior college. And what I can assure you that Matt is talking about in his article, and of course, you're alluding to the very, very top schools, Johns Hopkins, Harvard, and so forth. But what these, especially private liberal arts colleges, have in spades is this bureaucracy that is so over the top and so encroaching on all forms of education. It is more important to have a dozen vice presidents making $250,000 to $500,000 a year to do nothing, absolutely nothing. And they're
the provost of the division of the whatever chancellor's dean's best friend, that guy. Okay, yeah.
I had a good system. I did these comprehensive digital sponsorship campaigns for these teams that needed capital for their travel, for their uniforms, and so on. And you would have these schools who literally would cut off the knees of not just the coach, but the athletic director as well, telling them, no, you have to use our in-house system. And why would they want that, Matt? What would be the number one reason that they have to do this? Because they want to control the money. And that's it. There's nothing more to it than that. So
it's a rice bowl.
Exactly. So when everyone's up in arms, wondering, how did we get to this point where somebody like Elon Musk is taking a sledgehammer to the system? It's like you have allowed this for decades and decades and decades until eventually you had one of the most egotistical oligarchs this world has ever seen decide that now he's going to do something about it and you can't stop it. So we kind of brought this on ourselves in a lot of ways. I would imagine you probably agree with that.
Yeah, I think so.
And when we say we definitely don't mean us three, but collectively.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Look, Elon Musk and almost any, I mean, he's suppressing me. I've had personal disagreements with him, but for what he's doing especially to schools, USAID, some other things. The reason it's not polling as disastrously as you'd think is because there's so much resentment in the public about how some of these institutions operate. And so people, I think there's a subconscious feeling that people want to see some kind of, retribution enacted on these gigantic bureaucracies. And, what you're talking about reminds me, Peter, of, I talked to a professor at an Ivy League school a couple of years ago who was talking about, I think it was the ratio of professors to students in the 70s and 80s, and how, that's gotten smaller, but the amount of administrative staff, right? And not just the sort of DEI officers, although that's a big number for at the school, but there's just it's like an NFL team where every stupid relation of the owner has a $400,000 job, right, in an office somewhere. These big schools are like that. They've created all these jobs that don't contribute to learning in any meaningful way, and they're able to do this because there's like this elaborate con that goes on, basically, where tuition is allowed to endlessly rise because there's an unlimited amount of federal student loan lending, and so there's no pressure for them to lower prices ever. For a while they had the additional thing of students not being able to discharge their loans in bankruptcy, which made it even harder, right? So you can just endlessly raise prices even if you're not delivering a good product. And what you see them doing is they never pass the savings on to students, and they hire all those extra people, and they build lazy rivers and hanging gardens and all this stuff almost as an insult, I think, to people. And people get mad about it. I think it's totally natural that they get mad about it.
Well, not only that, but you also have a lot of these institutions, with very rare exceptions, that the sports teams, even football and basketball, lose the school's money. Like, this is not as profitable as people make it out to be. Yeah,
I didn't know that. Is that true?
That is true. With very few exceptions. You have teams in the SEC and teams in the Big 12, excuse me. Rutgers is not one of them, Jen.
Please, when I was in school, we were the Big 8. Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm way back. Go ahead.
Yeah, you have your exceptions. You have Ohio State football, you have Penn State football, you have programs like that. But once you get past that, this is a racket. Like, it's a full-blown racket. And if I was one of the staffers on DOGE, I would gut this thing I would gut it like 90%. It's that corrupt. And if you guys listen, there's still, unfortunately, way too many people who do not understand single payer healthcare and why that is the only solution. But I can assure you that if you polled every Trump voter, especially everyone who was a crossover from Bernie Sanders in 2015, 2016, what was the number one policy that everyone universally agreed on? Tuition-free public college, starting with trade schools. They are sick and tired of what it takes to actually learn a trade or get an education in this country that allows you to actually start a career without being in any form of debt, much less hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. Like, the absurdity of when everyone's like, oh, don't get your English lit degree. Well, let's just assume that some people were planning to get an English lit degree. Why do we not have a system in this country where, if we need more doctors, more welders, more electrical engineers, do we not have a tuition-free system where we want to pay you to learn how to do these jobs? Why do we not have that? That, to me, should be pretty simple. And we should be asking ourselves why we are not coalescing around this bread and butter issue that everyone can get behind. $70,000 a year for college.
It's incredible. I mean, and again, it's so hard to pay off those loans. They make it so complicated. I mean, I did a story on this probably 6-7 years ago, where I interviewed a whole bunch of people who are in their 70s still paying student loans. Like, you never get out from under these loans if you make a mistake somewhere along the way. It's impossible to get in, behind the 8 ball again. And it's ridiculous. There's no reason why it should be so punitive to learn a trade, which is supposed to benefit the community, right? Why do we want, under what rationale does that make any sense? And then you get into the additional problem of the schools that are charging this much. Not only do they have gigantic endowments in many cases, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, look at Harvard, right? Harvard has a $53 billion endowment. I mean, that's ridiculous. But look, just to take, there's an additional issue of schools that just accumulate cash that is not part of their endowment, that they could easily pass on in the form of savings to, into tuition. Columbia has $3.7 billion just sitting around that it doesn't use. Most of the state schools have somewhere between 500 million and $1 billion just sitting in bank accounts that they, while they're raising tuition, they're accumulating money. What is that all about? I don't understand what that's
Greed.
for.
Greed.
Yeah.
And it is especially infuriating. And I went on my rant about Columbia last week because, as somebody who did do journalism in high school, I had mentioned that twice I went to Columbia Scholastic Press Association for the high school. I don't know if you did it back in high school, Matt, but they do this thing at Columbia, CSPA. And the fact that this campus in particular is this, like, they used to pride themselves on the whole concept of protest and what that stood for. And the fact that they're acting how they are now, it's disgusting. Like, it's embarrassing to me that I in any way thought it was somewhat prestigious to be invited to that at Columbia. Like, this is disgusting.
It probably was at the time, it's just different now, right? And
Yeah.
And for the schools to be so craven when the federal funding is not even that big of a slice of the money that they're taking in, to give in when you can afford to not give in is kind of incredible to me. But whatever,
It's a travesty. We are creating generations of rubes because we apparently would rather live in a society of uneducated and unhealthy people. Because that's the only thing I can think of. We just want to be surrounded by unhealthy and uneducated people.
But that's also people, which is why we talk about, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, but who are the worst billionaires? I still maintain Bill Gates is the worst because he has a horrifically bad God complex.
You know what I'm going to compare that to?
Sure. But you also have the Waltons and you have Bezos who want the dumbest of the dumb in this society so that they'll continue to work for slave wages again, this is why education.
No, I was going to say you're arguing about how many angels can dance on the head of a pin with that. That's like the whole good billionaire. Like seriously, I seriously burn all that shit down.
But I think that this is, but I do think that this is an important transition because obviously the topic of the day is Israel and the amount of control that the lobby has over all corners of our society. We see what they're doing at Columbia. We see what the likes of billionaire Bill Ackman has to say. They're kind of giving away the game in a lot of ways because from where I stand, and I think, Jen, you'd probably agree, most, if not all, of the whole conundrum that is Israel, this is all about money and power. It's how it seeps into the system. It controls higher education. It controls our foreign policy. Is there any reason to believe that, the invisible hand of Miriam Adelson isn't the reason why Trump has now decided that we're going to go bomb Yemen, among other things? How bad would you say, because as long as you've been a journalist, would you say that the Israel lobby's control over our government has always been this bad, or do you think it's accelerated over the last few years, especially because of what's been happening over the last 2 years in particular?
So I've actually been fortunate to have never covered Israel and Palestine. Never got assigned to it, so it's not a particular area of expertise of mine. It came up a little bit recently, and I think, you talk about is it Miriam Adelson behind the bombing of the Houthis? I don't know. I can imagine that there might be some other people who'd be interested in those trade routes, but the speech thing, absolutely, right? So the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, the 2019 executive order that Trump signed, where they used the anti-Semitism definition by the IHCA, the International Holocaust Remembrance.
And the guy who wrote it, the guy who wrote it has even come out and said it's not appropriate in this instance. Like he even came out and said, like, this is not what that was about.
Yeah, he said it's not supposed to be a speech code.
Yeah,
and it's being used as a speech code, and so they did that. Then they have the new executive order, and the problem with it, and this I think is among other things, kind of an intellectual problem in the Republican Party. Like I just don't think some of them understand the law here, and so there are members within the Republican Party who saw that there was a huge political opportunity in the last 2 or 3 years on the speech question. J.D. Vance is, I think, an example of somebody who decided to make an issue out of censorship, and saw that the Democrats were vulnerable there, and talked about it a lot. But when they turn right around and essentially enact a version of the same kinds of hate speech laws that they're decrying in Europe, which is what the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act and those executive orders are. It's totally against the First Amendment what they're doing. We already have laws against discrimination, but they're adding a definition of anti-Semitism that could easily include legal speech. So the executive order, I think, is illegal. If it ever got to the Supreme Court, I think even this Supreme Court would probably shoot it down. But the Republican Party loves the fact that it's owned the speech issue for the last few years. to see them turn around and just sort of give it away again over this issue tells you a lot about how powerful that lobby is. Either there's a lack of understanding, or there's just an enormous amount of influence there. And my understanding is that it's more the latter.
Yeah.
Have you spoken with Whitney Webb, and have you read One Nation Under Blackmail?
I talked to Whitney once, but no, I this isn't my bailiwick at all. So
no, I totally understand. I think because now we're at a point where we're asking a lot of questions, and we should be asking a lot of questions, because the saber rattling is getting so dangerous. And I know people are just no, it won't. Trump has already gone completely back on his word regarding being a peace president. There is no peace if you're bombing Yemen. There is no peace if you have now started bombing Gaza all over again. And apparently the bombing of Gaza has now ramped up to an 11. Like they're just going full bore to completely destroy the entire area and commit a complete genocide. We thought that the reaction, especially of the very libertarian faction of the Trump movement, of the MAGA movement, which is really big, we thought for sure that there would be an inflection point, and it looks like there has been, because Thomas Massie is somebody that I think really understands the values of free speech. I think he's maybe the most honest operator in all of politics right now. He really believes in our constitutional rights in a way that even the ones that we would think would be on board with it are still playing partisan politics. Massie doesn't. Like, he honestly will go whichever direction the right answer is on. And I would hope that we could see more of that. But I think Massie also represents a turn that a lot of people in that MAGA movement are looking for, in which they really don't want this war bullshit. Like, that's not their jam. They know, especially because a lot of them are veterans. A lot of them may have been in Iraq or Afghanistan, and they know where this is going, and they see the writing on the wall, and they don't want it. And I do think that that could be a very powerful off-ramp depending on where things go. How far do you think Trump is going to be willing to take this? At this point, I think we're in a very dangerous position.
I don't know. I think there's an interesting moment here. Like, for instance, you talk about how there are different factions within the MAGA movement, and I was at the Republican convention last year, and due to a couple of bizarre accidents, my podcast partner and I were getting almost minute-to-minute updates about what they were thinking in terms of the choice of running mate. And it came down to Rubio and Vance at the end. And there were a couple of people in the room who were heavily pressing for Vance, whose arguments were essentially, we're going to lose the MAGA base if we are seen to be tied to kind of the old Pentagon military industrial complex types, and aren't seen as more of a grassroots thing. But then there was another faction that was led by like Lindsey Graham and folks like that, and a lot of the people who you're probably focused on, who are very aggressive on the Israel issue. They really wanted Rubio, right? And Trump's family, in the end, chose. It was my understanding that they chose Vance because they thought that overall it would be an easier sell to their base. Whereas the argument for Rubio is that they would get more crossover voters that way. So I think you're right. I think there is a schism within the Trump administration. I think there's a line, a political line, where they probably don't want to cross too much. But I honestly don't know. I mean, Trump is kind of an enigma, even to people who spend a lot of time with him. It's really hard to know exactly why he does things or what he thinks about. And even on this issue, I would have thought he would do the opposite, and he hasn't. So who knows?
I think he's in a pickle in some respects, because he's sort of between his big donors and a whole bunch of his supporters. And a lot of the MAGA base that is America first, they do not want to be supporting these foreign wars and whatever their reasoning is. And those were a lot of his people. So,
Absolutely.
he's sort of in a predicament. And that's why I'm not sure that everything that we're seeing and hearing that is known to us isn't somewhat being counteracted with stuff behind the scenes that isn't known to us. So, what might seem like is going this way isn't necessarily going this way. And I agree. I think he's sort of a wild card. Like, we really don't know. But I do appreciate the fact that he's at least having a conversation with Putin. Like, this is how it's supposed to be. And the fact that we went through the last administration without any diplomatic communications with quote unquote adversaries, which I reject that concept, but just that's insane to me. So just the fact that he's at least having discussions with people, I think that's a step up. That's just, my opinion.
You know what's so funny about that? Remember, if we go all the way back to 2007, when at the very beginning of the Democratic primary, before Obama got elected, Obama at the time, this was at the beginning of the campaign, Hillary was the front runner at the time. And there was a debate, I forget where it was, but one of the questions was, would you talk to the heads of, rogue nations like Syria or North Korea or Cuba? And everybody said, no, absolutely not. The United States shouldn't dignify, the Syrians or Assad or whatever. And Obama was the one exception. And he said, what do we have to be afraid of? I'll talk to anybody.
Exactly.
And this was, at the time, American liberalism was all for that. I remember thinking, wow, that's a kind of a sensible position. What a nice, refreshing change. And that was a big boost to his campaign. That was one of the reasons why he kind of won over the Democratic electorate at that time. And then something happened to the party in the interim where it became orthodoxy to no longer have that position of we should talk things through, even if we don't agree with people. Like, what do we have to be afraid of? There's no reputational risk for the United States to get in the room with somebody. Like,
Well, diplomacy isn't profitable.
Well, right. There's that. Yeah. Yeah.
When you think about all that's happened over the past decade, it's amazing how time flies. And you see this transition that has happened. You think of what has transpired between the two political parties, particularly the Democratic Party. We saw the sea change. It was very real, but the encroachment of the consultant class in particular. Neera Tanden obviously comes to mind because she's head of the Center for American Progress, which was probably, for all intents and purposes, the biggest one within the Democratic Party. You could argue
also the largest oxymoron I can think of, but anyway.
Of course, there's not much progress there. But it shouldn't come as a surprise that so much of the kneecapping of the populist left movement, yes, Wasserman Schultz played her role, but there were so many other components that were there. And most of it's just about money and power. This is not complex. And once you have the veil removed, and something as simple as we have super delegates in our party, I'm sure you remember very well, and I point this out to Jen in the audience all the time. If there's many instances over the course of that primary where people can look at and say, what is the true proof that the election was rigged? I look at the Washington primary, where Bernie was within an earshot of winning the entire 100 delegates in the state. Like, he destroyed Hillary in that state. He needed to get 75% of the vote, and he got like 73%. And yet, every single super delegate voter, including that little troll Patty, who I should just call Patty Mayonnaise at this point, Patty Murray gave, much like Governor Inslee and the rest of them, they all gave their super delegate vote to Hillary. And at that point, they're showing you clear as day, this thing is not on the level, and it never will be. So stop pretending. Well, Bernie actually put out this tweet today, shockingly, but he didn't say. Bernie Sanders has an idea for the left. Don't run as Democrats. Well, Bernie, what the hell took you so long?
I know.
Great idea. And that's how you create leverage. I don't understand how anyone thinks there is any other way that you are going to change things in this country in terms of left populism if you don't run as far away from the Democrats as possible. And what they did to you, what the establishment did to you, is a prime example of just that. You are as classical liberal as it gets, and they told you to kick rocks, literally.
Oh, it was worse than that. I mean,
Well, sure.
they implied that he was a Russian agent. You know, they leaked phony intelligence about him. And you know, I talked to Bernie about this in 2016 after that election. And you know, one of the things he talked about is how deep his affection was for the Democratic Party, that, you know, he had grown up poor in his neighborhood. He didn't know anybody who wasn't a Democrat, and that he really deeply believed in the institution. He personally liked Joe Biden because Biden had helped him get oriented when he came to the Senate. Bernie's, one of the problems is he's kind of a nice guy, right? And those relationships meant a lot to him. So when they you know, dirtied him up, and I think it was even worse for me in 2020, because he had proved that he could raise the money. That was the big criticism of him from within the party. How are you going to compete nationally if you can't raise money? And he led the party in money raising, and they still kneecapped him. And he took it, you know. And as you say, one of the ironclad rules in politics is you have to extract a price from somebody when, you know, you give them your support. And he didn't do it. He refused to do it. And he's only just now figuring out that, you know, he should have gone solo. He should have threatened to walk a lot earlier. And we might be in a very different place right now, because America was very ready to go in a different direction.
You and I were both in Philadelphia on that fateful weekend in 2016. And I remember two things that always stood out. I was at that People's Convention at that church right around the corner from Ben Franklin's gravesite. And what I remember most about that event was when Nina Turner came to the stage, gave her speech, and then she embraced Jill Stein. And I remember saying to a friend of mine, "Oh, that's going to play at the convention. I guarantee it."
Yep.
They're on pins and needles right now, and they, you know, really are trying to create this illusion of this unification of the party. And then they kicked Nina out of the convention. And then the other thing that I remember is that you had half the delegates walk out. They put on the noise blockers and all those things to pretend like this didn't happen. The writing was on the wall for Bernie to make a monumental move, and he blinked. And we remember that Trump, when he was pushed up against the wall, he told them, "No, you're totally going to be fair with me, or I'm going to run as an independent." Whereas Bernie was like, "Well, I think we could all get along here, and everything will be fine. And can't we just get along? Can't you just talk to my good friend Joe, and maybe we'll look up."
The problem is see, this is why I find this infuriating, which is why I think it was always Mick resistance, because at the end of the day, that was the only opportunity we've seen where it would have been possible for that to actually happen if Bernie had decided to run as an independent. But the fact is, he never had any intention of getting as far as he did. I don't think so. I think now I see it more clearly than ever, that I see the whole thing as sort of a facade. The whole political theater is like this ridiculous facade. And he's just playing his role as Mick resistance within what is supposed to be already the resistance, but it isn't either.
Really?
So
I mean,
ridiculous.
I mean, don't you think that Trump's election is proof that you can do devastating damage to the system? I mean, it could have been somebody else very easily, and votes still count. You know?
I'm not saying, well, maybe they do. I mean, that's a whole other thing about like election integrity. I mean, that's a whole other thing. But I think that we've been headed in this trajectory my entire lifetime, and it has been completely irrelevant which administration has been in there. We have been on this capitalist trajectory that is out of control now. And Trump is not the problem. He is a symptom of what we've allowed to happen for so many years. And I've said it many times, I actually think he represents us best as to who we are in the world. I can't think of a better representation of what the United States is perceived as around the world than Donald Trump. So he's exactly what we've asked for. But the problem is a capital problem. And I do think that the trajectory has been the same with very few little exceptions and certain groups that get thrown bones here and there. And that's good for them. I get it. But overall, we have a capital problem. And until people realize that this is a global class war and stop looking at it like it's a red, blue, left, right thing, we're going to keep circling the drain. So that's my problem with it. And if Bernie really had any intention of being part of a revolution, he would have done so because he had the opportunity to do so, which brings me back to that. Well, I never thought he really meant revolution. I think he's a reformer, not a revolutionary. And at the end of the day, he got right back in line per Mick resistance, which is why I think it's theater.
And he had that one moment. After he won the Michigan primary where everyone was kind of like, oh man, he could actually do this. And then he had that debate down in Miami. And I have never, ever seen a debate in my life where one candidate obliterated the other one. But that was also the one where he said, he didn't give me $250,000 for a Wall Street speech. He said I was dangerous, and he's right. I am dangerous. And then I'm just thinking, now they're going to really show you just how rigged the system really is, because he's threatening the actual lifeblood of capitalism, which is Wall Street. And if he's willing to go there, then it has to be a revolution. There is no other way. And who knows what happened? Was he threatened? Who knows? But what we do know is it was worth taking that chance, even if he only got 15% of the vote at a minimum, if he decided to run on the Green Party ticket, which he had every legal right to do if he wanted to do it in that instance. We're looking now at how do we make up for that mistake? What do we do now? Do we look at this from the perspective of we have to stop looking to Bernie Sanders and AOC with their little come on back to the Democrats tour that they're doing right now?
Good luck with that.
Which almost makes you wonder, okay, Bernie, you make this statement today about that people should be running outside the two-party system. That's great. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to hold rallies now and tell people to get the hell away from the Democratic Party? Then we'll believe that you may actually have woken up, even if it's at the 11 o'clock hour of his career and his life. But at this point, he's got to either do something, shit, or get off the pot, because, man alive, things are really bad out there. And I'm thinking, as we kind of wind down the conversation, you look at the way that runaway broken capitalism is at this point, where you have all of these representatives doing insider trading in full public view. You have multiple Twitter pages devoted exclusively to tracking the trades of our representatives, with Pelosi being at the head. When you get to that point, in my opinion, you've reached a point of a vote of no confidence within the culture. And that's why things, I think, are spiraling. Israel's one part of it. Wall Street's another part. But there's many components that have led us to this point where everyone thinks it's Trump's fault. No, it's not. Trump is just taking advantage of every broken element of our system at this point, and he's cashing in on it. A lot of other people would too if they were in his place.
See, the reason I look at this a little differently, what you're describing is there's this gigantic frustration and lack of confidence with institutional America at every level. People are angry at Wall Street. They're angry at the Fed. They're angry at universities. They're angry at big law firms. And they're angry at all sorts of things. And this has been a feature, not just of the United States, but politics all over the world. There have been these uprisings on the left and on the right. They're generally termed populist uprisings, but they all have a similar character, which is we're pissed off. Our governments are not delivering for us anymore. And we're going to elect somebody. I mean, I remember back in 2014, I think there was a clown who got a big share of the vote in Italy named Beppe Grillo, if I remember correctly. Just anybody who wasn't a politician. And I'm actually encouraged by the fact that a lot of these folks are winning. Even the Trump election shows that there is enough voter anger out there to propel somebody from outside the system into a leadership situation inside the system. Now, do we want this particular group of people running things? Maybe not, right? But it can be done. So I'm actually encouraged by it.
I said it a while ago. Look, I'm happy. Bring on the revolution. Facilitate that. Every single firing, every single cut, every single unemployed veteran, every single one of those people is a potential Luigi Mangione. And you know what? Everything that he's doing by pissing off his own base, by not being America first and all that stuff, that's facilitating all the anger amongst the red side. And that is a whole different animal that I don't think that people are prepared for. And we've said that before on this show. But yeah, I think it's just keep doing it. It's like mask off. Mask off. We are empire. We do not care. We don't care about the least of these. We're just all about, beachfront in Gaza. So I'm let them, I love it. Let them be who they are. It's like, you be you, boo. You do.
Matt, do you believe that the Democratic Party may be on a trajectory that they cannot recover from?
Yeah, I think they're close. Their numbers are at a historic low at the moment. They're unable to capitalize on the Trump situation, and one of the problems with the way Trump is doing his presidency is that they're focusing heavily on revelations, right? So they're just their political strategy is just to dump stuff out onto the public at a pace faster than mainstream media can respond to it. And there is so much ugly stuff that's out there that it's forced the Democratic Party to make decisions, and they're not responding well to it. You see that thing with Chuck Schumer the other day where he's sort of picking on average people. That's a real thing within that party. There's an sense of entitlement, and that comes off. You can't be more off-putting than that in a politician. So what they really should have done after 2016, I think, is said, look, we are losing kind of the ordinary voter, like the people who made up the backbone of this party forever, which, from longshoremen to administrative assistants to, people sort of middle income to lower income people. Those people are we're losing those folks. Instead, they went completely the other way to this boutique upper class type of politics. That's why, 40 out of 50 of the richest congressional districts are blue. And
it's just gross.
But that's been a suicidal decision, right? Because the numbers aren't there to support that kind of politics. So until they make a decision to go away from the lobbyists and go away from, being supported by private equity firms and all that, they're going to have the same conceptual problem, and while they continue to suppress the sort of Bernie direction, as they all but called it a foreign inspired movement. So they're not going to go there. I'm curious to know what you think they're going to do. I have no idea what their strategy was.
I think they're going to go away. I actually think we've seen our last Democrat president from this incarnation of the Democratic Party. I think they'll continue to exist in places, you got them in California and whatever. But as you said, their numbers are only going down. So again, and I'm not a math person, but when your numbers are going down, that doesn't lend itself to thinking you're going to come back from where you are right now. It lends itself to that you're going to continue to fall off. And they are seen as completely elitist. And it really is off-putting to most people, to working people. And so there's more of a fuck the Democrats in it for most people than it is, we like the Republicans. And that is something, and that is even with people that I know that voted for Trump. It wasn't that they like Trump, is that they just had it with the Democrats. And so, that says a lot. That's not encouraging. Now, could this party at some point come back with a new thing where it actually is labor and it's a working party, people's part, and all of that, and then maybe. But this neoliberal Clinton-esque situation they have going on, it's dead. And most people have soundly rejected it, and they are the last people to know. They're like the people that are still in the Democrats are like the violin quartet on the Titanic. That's what they feel like to me.
And a primary example of that we can share with you is this. I mean, listen, it's a long shot, but we know Josh Wheel. He's a friend. He's a good dude. You know, he's running for Congress in Florida's 6th congressional district. Randy Fine is
It's Tim Walz's open seat. Yeah.
Okay.
And for all intents and purposes, Randy Fine may be the worst legislator in the state of Florida. He's that bad.
Wow.
He's horrible. He's horrible. People don't know because we've been able to keep him to ourselves. But
you want to talk about a Zionist psychopath? I mean, of the worst kind. Like, this guy brags about dropping bombs.
Well, like the law in our state resolution that mimics the federal one about the definition of anti-Semitism, he was that here. Okay.
And what's most perplexing about this particular story is that Wheel has raised a lot of money. Like, he's raised, I think, like somewhere between $1.5 and $2 million. Granted, there's no races going on right now, so it's not hard. And of course, Randy Fine is Randy Fine, and of course, he's totally got the endorsement of the Donald. So he's running with that.
So gross.
So we know his campaign manager and finance director. And they put out an advertisement that apparently had a B-roll cutaway of AOC. Now, AOC apparently did not only not like that, but the idea that we have to say vice chair of the Democratic Party, David Hogg, and the fact that he decided to put out a statement disparaging this young man who we know, who worked his effing ass off for Jen when she ran against Wasserman Schultz, that this little pencil neck, spoiled child who took advantage of a tragedy for a political gain, this guy's out there writing disparaging, the vice chair of the Democratic Party.
He's writing crap about Jackson.
But he's writing crap about a guy who, without question, knows how to run a campaign. And he's telling him that he's a grifter and he's this and he's that. It's like, dude, have you looked in the mirror lately?
No, Jackson is who saves candidates from grifters.
Correct.
He's the one who got me out of shit that I got in because of grifters. So that's
listen, I freely admit this. I ain't going to say the name, but a Bernie grifter found their way into Jen's campaign, and we had to get that person out.
Yeah,
and
we've had
Jackson
some problems.
Is the person who saved us, and thankfully he has, he really knows his stuff. And I think he puts it at like a 20% shot, which I would say is probably about right. When you really add it all up, he's got the money, he's got the ground game. Randy Fine is absolutely disliked, even by his own MAGA people.
But it's a red district. I mean, let's be real.
So if a miracle happens, it's about a 20% shot, he could pull it off. Right. But you've got the vice chair of the party trying to make sure that he has no chance of winning. It's at some point, you just got to say.
They're shooting themselves in the foot. Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, because
I mean, it's a dysfunctional situation, right? When you're trying to sabotage people in your own party, against the person, the people who you've identified as being like Hitler-like.
Yes.
That says a lot about your motivations. The one last thing, I know we're winding down the conversation, but I think apropos to all of this, the political analyst David Shore just put out this big analysis of what happened in the last election, which is really interesting. It got almost no coverage, and it said a number of things that are like going to be really painful for Democrats to hear. But one of them is that they will no longer benefit by an increase in voter registration. In other words, the more voters that vote now, they actually do worse as that number goes up, as the percentage goes up, because there's been this kind of sea change, particularly with like middle to lower class voters of color, right? So Hispanics, blacks, they're just not voting the same way anymore. And so the traditional formula of let's go out and get as many votes as we can, we do voter registration drives, work on turnout and enthusiasm, and that's going to be how we're going to get elected. That'll actually make things worse in a lot of districts.
That's what happened here.
Jen, would you like to share with Matt?
Allow me to tell you how in 2000, I forget what year it was, but before
like 2019.
But it was before I was a candidate. I went up to our DEC chair in Broward. Now, Broward is like the bluest county in Florida. And at that point, Was. Okay. So I go up to our DEC chair and I'm like, okay, so now that they, we actually sort of have this mandate because, it was right after the midterms. I'm like, okay, so, now what? What's the plan? And she looked at me and she said, all we're doing is banning assault weapons and registering voters. And that's it. As if she was so annoyed to have to keep answering, like, what's your plan? What are you going to promote? So meanwhile, since then, all our local Dems have ever done in this state is register voters, and they're registering Republicans at 20-1 to Democrats.
Wow.
That's how dumb they are.
20
so
to
they're prioritizing registering voters, and yet the majority of voters, 20-1, are Republicans here. And by the way, most people register as no party.
Right.
So Democrats are actually third. And yet that's all they've been doing is registering voters. So when people want to know why Florida's red, thank the Democrats. They've been out there registering Republicans left and right.
When you lose a statewide race to Rick Scott by 13 points, you got a real fucking problem.
Yeah, that was an incredible result. Yeah. No, and but do you see any evidence that there's a come to Jesus moment happening? I just don't, which is fascinating.
I think it all comes full circle because, you had a job to do. And we probably all share a very similar opinion about Barry Weiss and even probably to an extent Elon Musk. But people just can't seem to do political nuance. Like, that's not allowed. And when something as important as, did these major tech companies deliberately rig the 2020 presidential election against Donald Trump? The answer is yes. They manipulated the algorithm. They made sure that certain stories were only released that favored Biden and hurt Trump. That is how you rig an election if you're not rigging ballots. That's as close as you could get to it today, considering how all of our information is dispersed. And when Elon, for whatever reason, woke up one day and decided this is what he wanted to do, he tasked you with doing this. And what you discovered was mass corruption on an incredible scale that was a global reach. And people called you a traitor and that you're this and that. It's like, well, but it's still true.
It's true. Yeah, I know.
You don't have to like it, but it's still true. Like,
right.
You cannot tell me that Google did not manipulate the algorithm. Did they do it? Yes, they did. And now we're seeing the pendulum swing in the other direction. We have DOGE, which in some respects is probably doing a decent job, but in other respects, it's clearly doing it to the benefit of Elon.
Oh,
so
of course, yeah.
We've gotten to this point where everyone's thinking that it's yes, I see the world in black and white, and that includes corruption. And that's how everyone should look at this. And that, to me, I think, is the biggest issue here. So there are people that I have no doubt are going to come onto our chat because we get the entire spectrum of politicos.
We do, which I like. We have a very broad spectrum. Yes.
We'll get people that say it was great that you had Matt Taibbi on. And then there will be people that will say you had that traitor come on your phone. It's like they just, and that's where you kind of just have to let it go, because we were behind Force the Vote. We have been very adamant about our opinion about Jimmy, but he was right about the issue. And you have to fight on the lines where you agree. The same is true when it came to Ukraine. We saw what this was from the beginning. This was all about controlling the rich natural resources in the western part of that country. That's why we tried to get them into NATO, so we can control them. All those things that the Biden and Obama administrations have done is now being done in full view of everybody with Trump when he says, we're totally naming it red, white, and blue land. It's like, now it's all out there. Now you can see it for all it's worth. So do you still want to believe that the reason that we're in Ukraine is because Putin's trying to take over Europe? I would like to believe that there's some sensibility with people, but I think what we really just need to do is recognize that there is a huge coalition of populist uprising out there, and we have to get rid of the red blue lines. Got to get rid of them.
I totally agree with that, and I think once people get used to the idea that the political labels just need to be tossed out and reimagined, there'll be a lot more sense in American politics. I mean, I got called a traitor probably because I was one, in the sense that the people who I was writing about, they really were the bad guys in the story I was writing about. There's nothing I could do about that. But in a different universe, they would just be a small coterie of connected Washington people who just they suck in every direction, right? And the larger sort of group of disaffected, disenfranchised people who've been screwed over by most of America, I think they're going to find a collective identity. In line with what you're talking about, which will make more sense than this red-blue thing that we've been pushing.
Guys, if you are not currently subscribed to Racket News, please make sure that you do. Matt is doing something that is kind of a needle in the haystack these days. Real journalism.
Yeah.
Some great stories up right now, including Racket on Wall Street. Can't anyone here play the game? Yeah, if you've got the inside track, you sure can. Also find out more information pertaining to what we were talking about earlier, about the corruption within higher education. And then also, what direction is this country going in right now? It does seem like Israel has our collective balls in a vice. How are we going to break free of that? And how are we going to break free of the Democratic Party once and for all to actually have a populist movement and a populist party representing us in this country? A lot of hard work ahead, but we can't thank you enough for coming on. Jen, final thoughts?
No, thanks, Matt. Always great to talk to you. And
Thanks,
I am always appreciative. Like, we said in the very beginning, like real journalists who actually do work, it's not easy to come by. It's not easy to come by. Like we have Jordan, he's a friend, but he's all domestic. He's all domestic and he's got his niche and it's great. But yeah, we need more people out doing actual research. And I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for having me on. And
absolutely.
I hope you don't get too much flack.
That's all right.
Absolutely not. Thanks, brother.
Take care.
Have a great evening. He's one of our favorites. And he's always been very consistent. And you know what? It's easy to get jaded when the entire apparatus throws themselves at you nonstop.
Yeah.
Matt's this, Matt's that. Again,
he doesn't seem to have any F's to give. I got to tell you.
Not at all. Not at all. And you know what? You can tell he has no F's to give because he's the one person that I could think of, Jen, like really the one person that I could think of. That's great, Travers. Thank you for doing that. That means a lot. And for all of you guys, please show Matt some love. Again, he makes his living through our support. Links are in the description. The reason why I wholeheartedly support Matt Taibbi is because he's pretty much the only person who told Elon to go kick rocks. Everybody else that has an inside track to a billionaire at that level, that has that amount of power and control, no one is going to give that up. Heck, you've got influencers getting impregnated by him, for God's sake.
Again, I question that. I question that.
Maybe. Test tube.
Something is very weird about that and the 15 babies. It's just gross.
Remember, if you are here, and we appreciate you being here, we've had a pretty big crowd tonight, which is great. And if you haven't,
did you run our people?
Of course I did, but
I don't ever see it. How come I
never?
You
don't pay attention because you're too distracted. Go to patreon.com for as little as $5 a month. You could become a supporter of our small but mighty channel. We have had, again, a great audience tonight. We have 1/1.5, if you will, big stories left to cover this evening.
Wait, what's a half? What's a half of a story?
Well, it's a story that transitions into another story. So it's like one.
What are you playing? Like, what's your plan here?
We're going to talk about the JFK files. What's been discovered so far. Tony Clifton, thank you so much for the $5.
Let's do super chats. That's a good segue.
USA at End Stage Empire. Have you looked around?
Fingers crossed.
Teresa, thank you so much for the $10. We really appreciate your support. Chip, thank you for checking in at $5. The system is dissolving. What are we doing to prepare for the chaos to come?
Well, I'm going rural.
Moving to the mountains.
What we need to be doing is creating mutual aid community support networks, downsizing and living in self-sustainable communities. That's what we need to be doing. That's the only way this is going to go. So, but that's my plan.
Progressive Lefty with the Canadian $2.79.
I like
Great guest. Wish I wasn't working at the moment, but we're glad that you're here and listening.
We recently had a meeting with one of our favorite Canuckies.
Yes. Thank you so much, Kat. Yes. Subscribe to Racket News. Remember, you're going to get information that you're generally not going to get in other places.
Okay, that's a good point.
That's a good one, me, myself, and I. Democrats are half a point. Democrats
you and I both clicked it at the exact same time, and that's why I did that. Yeah.
It's weird, guys. Jen and I actually finish each other's sentences every once in a while. It's kind of weird, but that's what happens when you work with somebody and you kind of just get a feel for, where their head's at. We can hope that Jerusalem will fall. And so there was a clip, and this is a good transition because what has been discovered? Well, when it comes to the JFK files, there's a lot of clues. There isn't a smoking gun. There isn't this definitive, oh, who did it? It's that person right there. But what you do recognize in the information that has been presented so far, because there's a lot of redacted files not unredacted files, I should say, that has to be read through. I think it's like 20 to 30,000 pages worth of information. It's a lot. But here's what has been discovered and is indisputable. We had a guest on our show, Mr. McCarthy, who wrote.
I was just going to say, because Kim today, her guest was kind of like that. I'm like, we did that. Yeah. Okay, go on.
Sabby did have on Ken before, JFK and RFK versus Zionist extremism. And the creme a la creme topic in this particular book was James Jesus Angleton.
Yes.
And the role that he played as a Mossad double agent in the CIA to basically deal with JFK. There is also reason to believe that Jack Ruby was connected to Angleton and connected to the Mossad. And so, should that surprise anybody? Remember, Oswald said from the second he was brought into the Dallas PD precinct, I'm just a patsy. He didn't say he wasn't involved, but he said that he was a patsy.
Oh, yeah. No, he was clearly involved because they knew where to find him. I mean, he was brought in, whether willingly or not, he was involved. But it's just a matter of whether or not he actually shot JFK.
And keep in mind, if you look throughout history, whether it's, John Wilkes Booth, Jesus Sogales, I think is how you say his name, who assassinated McKinley. Every assassin always admits that especially if they get a president, they want the glory. It's everything.
Right. It would only be somebody hired and part of a plan that wouldn't, right?
If Oswald assassinated the president, like Nixon, I did it.
Well, you would think. I mean, now what's interesting to me is for years and years, with many rational and thoughtful people have known that it was obviously some sort of inside job, like who did this? Like, obviously there was a thing. It wasn't just, oh, he got shot, right? We know that. But I think that for the most part, and I will say I always thought it was much more about the CIA. And we talked about this when Ken was here and about what happened between him and Kennedy and the Dulles brothers. And that was basically a motive, which is still a valid, I'd say it's still a valid argument, but now it really does look much more so that it has to do with Israel.
Yes.
And not about that the CIA the head of the CIA being dismissed. Also, guys, Kim Iverson does a really good breakdown of this. She really digs deep into this. There's a whole segment about it. Quite good. But the point is there were many parties that had motive, right? Like it could have been, like she said, it could have been, the Cubans are definitely involved and not Cuban people, but at the time, like that was involved in it. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, this is an Israel thing.
I think it's without question an Israel thing. And as was posted, I can't make out this person's name, but I sent it over to Colin. And this is one of the more important unredacted statements from the JFK files. Uncomfortable truth. JFK wanted to strip the CIA of its autonomy, force AIPAC, Dr. Simon Godek. And this is a huge account that is posting this. over 1 million subscribers. Force APAC, formerly the American Zionist, what was it called, Jen?
I don't remember. This is before my time. It's whatever
the American Zionist Coalition or something like that. Yeah. To register as a foreign agent, block Israel's nuclear ambitions, and challenge the Federal Reserve's grip on U.S. currency. That's why he was assassinated. And you know what? It was always a combination of things.
That's a lot of things. Right. Well, but again, that's a lot of variables.
What I will say, and what I think is indisputable, and the biggest reason above all others that Jack was assassinated, he was a true commander-in-chief. He believed that the buck stopped with him and that he was the final line of defense when it came to crucial decision-making for the United States of America. And there were other people, whether it was J. Edgar Hoover, whether it was James Jesus Angleton, whether it was Allen Dulles.
Well, and there were a lot of people that would have benefited, whether it was Lyndon B. Johnson. There were a lot of people that served to benefit from him being assassinated. And guys, definitely go check out our interview with friend Ken McCarthy about his book on this, because I'm kind of proud to say we were talking about it before this was even released. We're really ahead of the curve on some things.
Sean, we'll cover Candace Owens on Monday if it's a really good clip. The other thing you have to remember about channels like Candace Owens, Candace Owens is a multimillionaire, so she's got a crack staff that could get in there.
We need her showing our clips, not us showing her clips.
Yeah, that would be great.
I'm just like, why do we need to show her clips? We don't need to promote Candace Owens. She's doing fine.
Well,
although Daily Wire, not so much.
Oh, yeah, that really
looks like that might be falling apart.
We're not going to get into the Daily Wire tonight because that's a long story, but we could do that on Monday.
But it gave me a warm, fuzzy feeling to picture like our friend Ben, like all verklempt about
Listen,
it.
Nothing is happening to our channel. Do not even suggest it. It's not happening. We're going to fix the problem. Don't worry about it.
Bye-bye, Benny.
And I'm Yisrael High. Real big time.
I can't.
But what you also have to remember, and this is the other thing about LBJ, no president before or since, maybe Trump, LBJ was as pro-Israel as you could possibly get. Do you really think if Jack had lived and was reelected almost assuredly in 64, that if that incident with the USS Liberty happened in the Mediterranean Sea, that he would have covered it up? No, Jack probably would have ended the state of Israel on the spot if something like that happened.
So point being, if he didn't get dead when he got dead, he would have gotten dead then.
Well, possibly, but what would have happened is if there was, and because keep in mind, that was an act of war.
Oh, completely. And it got completely covered up. Completely covered up.
Completely bury the biggest naval ship in the United States of America. Tried to bury it in the Mediterranean Sea. Couldn't do it. They killed 70 American soldiers.
And there was no ramifications for this. Nothing happened.
LBJ and McNamara covered it up.
Right.
How much you want to bet that it wasn't just digging into JFK's assassination, but also digging into the truth about the USS Liberty is what got Nixon kicked out of office? You really think Nixon is that big of a criminal compared to other presidents?
Oh, at this point, no. At this point, now that the mask is off, we see not. No, Nixon's problem at the end of the day was hubris, because had he just come clean and owned it, it would have been a whole different thing. So that was really what really got him in the end, I think. But no, and everything is relative. Like, people look back now and be like, Watergate, who gives a shit about that? Like, that's like the least offensive thing that we've seen in our corruption politics.
You have the Zionists on social media talking about how a lot of the files so far have indicated a lot of crossover with the USSR. Keep in mind that there was an entire back channel of communication between JFK and Khrushchev, and people pretend like that wasn't what was really going on. JFK and Khrushchev negotiated the end to the Cuban Missile Crisis, and effectively the highest point of the Cold War. Everything was on a downward trajectory post-1962. That had to do with removing missiles from Turkey, and they're removing their missiles from Cuba.
All of which is bad for business.
All of it. How many oligarchs in the United States wanted Kennedy dead the second he would not go in and take out Castro? Castro destroyed billions upon billions of dollars in gambling revenue for the oligarchs in the United States. That's why you had the Bay of Pigs. That's why these things happen. And some people think it's simple, that money and power is too simple. No, it isn't. Kings are killed. People are always on the chopping block if you get in the way of capital. That has always been the danger. That was Bernie's greatest danger when he ran in 2015 and 2016. Bernie was fucking with capital, and they had to make an example of him, and Bernie wasn't willing to fight the way we needed him to. That being said, we are dancing in very dangerous waters right now. And there was a great Instagram clip that a comedian by the name of Jonathan Randall, who I believe is Jewish as well. Is that correct, Jen?
He's most definitely Jewish. He grew up down here. Remember when he came on, he and I played Jewish geography. So he's actually local tribe to me. Get that if Mitch is watching. There's another one of me.
Jen sent this.
He went to my Hebrew Academy in Miami Beach.
Jen sent this clip to me the other day and said, and I quote, "If anybody captured my feelings perfectly."
This is the most... Yeah. And we've had him on, guys. You should check it out because he's really great.
Is Jonathan Randall. I grew up in an Orthodox Jewish household in Miami Beach, Florida. I graduated high school from the Hebrew Academy, and the first time I went to Israel, I was 15 years old. I was lied to all my life about the creation of Israel, the reality of Zionism, and the Palestinian people. It's not that one day I became pro-Palestinian. It's that I am pro-humanity and believe in freedom and equality for all people, no matter their religion, ethnicity, or nationality. I am a proud Jew who stands strongly against Jew hatred and understands that the best way to combat anti-Semitism is not to allow a country and political ideology to ethnically cleanse, occupy, and commit genocide in the name of Judaism. It doesn't matter if you call him Hashem, Allah, or Jesus. We are all God's children. And we weren't created to murder and hate each other. I don't speak out against the crimes of Israel and their egregious violations of Palestinian human rights because I hate being Jewish. I do so because I love it and can't stand seeing a part of me I hold so dear being corrupted and causing such immense suffering to the people of Palestine. Hashem did not choose the Jewish people to be warmongering oppressors. He chose us to be the light of the world. And we will never be that through forced displacement and mass murder. The Holy Land is for all people, and to claim it as your own is to desecrate it. We can't be divided by human constructs. We have to be united in being human. So do you only care about you and yours, or for all of God's creations? Because one day we will all die, but it's up to us how we will live. I choose to live with love, standing up for the oppressed. Will you?
The best. I was so good.
It was.
I know.
Very powerful.
Very powerful. And that's exactly how I feel like when he was, well, although everyone knows I'm an atheist, so it's not like a God thing for me, but in terms of just being proud of where I'm from and being proud of my people, I'm very proud to be Jewish. This is devastating for me on so many levels. So it's horrible. And it is totally fostering anti-Semitism, which is totally unproductive. But yeah, that's how I feel. That's exactly how I feel.
It's how anybody who can actually see through the propaganda feels. Now, I'm of the mind, are there really warped individuals out there? Yes. But much like Mitch, I put it in quotations as if he's like a fake person.
He isn't. And I'm going to most likely get hell for tonight's show once this
he started it.
Oh, it isn't about
do anything.
Again,
But it is, without question, a class war, nothing more. Much like everything else we talk about in politics, everything is related to this. JFK was a traitor to his class, much like FDR. JFK wanted to change this country in a way that was reflected.
FDR was protecting his class. Let's be real.
He was. That's true. That's actually more true. JFK actually was trying to change things in a very profound way. And there was this old guard led most likely by Allen Dulles and a cadre of other people that wanted no part of this, because some people do see themselves as playing God. There is something to be said for that.
I liked what he said also about, when you talk a lot about, it's like that the Jews are the chosen people, right? And when you think about it, how he thinks about it, that the Jewish people were chosen to share light and bring healing. And that's what Tikkun Olam is. It's about helping repair and heal the world. So when you think of it from that way, and he was raised, trust me, when I tell you, I know where that area, he was raised Orthodox. And the fact that he can see that is so, it gives me hope. And it isn't overnight. But he also, and we talked about this when he was on here, he's definitely had his fair share of ostracization from our local tribes people as well.
All of the writing is on the wall. And there's people that get caught up in this idea that it's funny. I don't want to give Hillary Clinton credit for anything, but there is one thing that she did say that is actually true about politics. There is a public position and there is a private position. The private position is infinitely more important because that's where a person really stands. Now, while Jack had some favorable things to say about Israel, keep in mind this was before 1967, when all hell really broke loose in the worst way. 1948, of course, was a catastrophe, but 1967 was the point of no return. And
the biggest difference between those two times in terms of where America was an empire was in 1948, really the UK, well, Britain, I don't know. Like at this point, it's like, was it England? Was it Britain at that time? I don't know. But the British mandate was still what was happening. So at that point, they were still sort of calling the shots. And when they handed that over to us, and then you get into the 60s, it's a whole other thing. Because now at this point, American empire is completely dominated. So you're talking two completely different eras between 48 and 20 years later.
No, absolutely. And we have to make a choice. We have to decide as a nation. If there is irrefutable evidence, which I believe there is, that Israel, maybe above all other reasons, is why Jack was assassinated, we have to ask ourselves, how much more are we willing to put up with the Zionist construct systematically taking over the United States? Because that's what
again, I don't see it as them taking us over as much as we're wielding our power in that way. We're doing it. We're prioritizing the Zionist project as part of the American empire.
But here's the thing. Our government is in many ways a living, breathing entity that can be controlled by money.
Thank you, Travers. Thank you.
Yeah. To me, what we're looking at here is kind of like a blob that's just gotten, as you often have said, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. Well, at the breakneck speed that the Trump administration is moving at right now, on behalf of Israel in many instances, mind you, and especially with this saber rattling with Iran, that is just
which is also, again, on behalf of Israel. But is it? Or is it on behalf of us, and we use that as our excuse? Again, this is you're letting the tail wag the dog. That's every time we say it that way, it's a tail wagging the dog. This is an American empire problem. Completely. American empire is the only thing that keeps the Zionist project alive. If American empire ceases to exist, so does the Zionist project, and not the other way around. So therefore, who is the bigger party? And it's like they can only exist so long as we exist. We can exist without them. That's all we need to really understand. And when we implode, which we are, they will cease to exist as well.
And
so
one of the
that's the thing.
And the other thing that should not be lost on people. Many of you know that over the past 48 to 72 hours, the amount of people that Israel had mass murdered in Palestine in the year 2023 up until October 7th was about 700 people. In the last 48 to 72 hours, they have carpet bombed Gaza and another 700 plus people are now dead. including some members of the United Nations. So they're now killing the UN members.
Well, again, why would we be surprised? They hate the UN. Was he wearing press vest? Was that a press? He was wearing a special vest. Was it pressed or something?
Yes.
It might have.
What happened? لو اللي طف احمد طف الطريقه ايوه قولي يا رب لا لا عنده بكر
It's the amount, like the dead baby thing is and yeah, it's just but I think the numbers are so skewed anyway at this point, and this is just based on, and I'm so not a math person. It's kind of frustrating that I'm having to crunch the numbers because I feel like I'm the last person on the planet that should be crunching the numbers. But we've got to realistically be at 500,000 dead Palestinians now. Realistically, we have to be like, and again, people, when they give those numbers, they're only, the best case scenario is that they only include the people that are killed from direct violence, shot, bombing, etc. That's even if they're being honest about those numbers. But the majority of people in a genocide don't die in that way. The majority of people, it comes from famine, disease, hypothermia, children having heart attacks out of fear. You know, so those numbers are not counted. And again, it's like, I hate, this is not, I don't see a way out of this without there being 2 million dead people, another 2 million dead people. Like, I don't.
Well, think about the post-traumatic stress. Think about the potential suicides that are going to come as a result of this. You're also forgetting generational trauma that will never cease to exist as long as we're alive. I am very adamant about this because I've seen it. I've seen it up close. I have family members that think that this is a good thing, that believe in this. And I don't have anything to do with them, and I never will. I think there are some lines that you cross. I mean, I've intimated to Jen before that there are people that truly believe that they are ethnically, morally, and emotionally superior beings. They believe it.
That's through generations of white supremacist propaganda. And that really went into hyperdrive after 9/11 in this country, specifically with the Islamophobia and the anti-Arab sentiment. But the white supremacy, that whole thing, that's how it's been working forever. Like, that's how it's been working
Forever.
So it's, yeah. But right now, with what's going on in Palestine, that's what explains. It's so easy to dehumanize people when you've spent generations doing so. This didn't happen overnight. So people like Mitch are people that truly believe that Palestinians aren't a real thing, that they're just a whole bunch of Arabs and they want to kill all the Jews and all of that same bullshit that I have been so fortunately able to pull myself out of that brain rot. But like, that's the thing. Like, they really believe that these people are dangerous. Now, in his case, again, it's willful ignorance, but that's the sentiment, that these are all just Arabs that want to kill us. You know, these are people that have no concept about anything really, truly about Palestinians.
They don't want to. They're subhuman in their mind.
Yeah.
Well, that's why they talk about them the way that they do. I think Zionists are subhuman because they don't know the meaning of the word humanity. It doesn't exist to them. You cannot bomb your
white supremacists. It's white supremacy. It's the same concept. That's why they get along so well with Nazis. It's all the same people. You know, if you believe in a superior race of some kind, that's the same people. Zionists, and that's why I call them Zio-Nazis.
And don't forget, guys, and Mark J, thank you so much for the $2. U.S. will reap what it sows in time. Thank you, Jay.
Absolutely. And we're going to take our little Zionist project friend with us.
Yes.
And look, here's hoping BRICS, you know, I hope that they are successful in what they're doing, just because I want all countries to do well. I don't see it as a net sum game. Like, I don't begrudge China and Russia's success. I don't understand. Like, what benefit is that to me to be like? I don't understand. They're not my enemy. They're not our enemy. That's not our enemy. Our enemy is the oligarchy. The enemy is capitalism and the oligarchy. That's the only enemy we all have.
Well, if anything, we should definitely be very concerned about the direction we're going in right now for no other reason. Because if you care about the United States of America, if you care about the founding principles of what this country is supposed to be all about, and I do believe in them, I do. Zionism and the state of Israel will take us down. They're already taking us down. And if we do not get off this, you know, a burning, what is it, a burning horse?
We are not willing to forego that. We are not willing to forego that project. American empire is unwilling to let go of the Zionist project. That's it. Why? Various reasons, various motives. But it isn't that Israel, and so we're kowtowing to them. No. They're on the payroll.
It's not a question of them being on the payroll.
It's completely a question of them being on the payroll.
Hold on a minute. Hold on. If you look at the response that most people are having right now towards higher education, not just Columbia, but Columbia obviously is the one that's front and center right now. Most people do not like this shit. They don't like it. They don't like it in their face. And there is a significant portion of the MAGA movement. And I'm talking about people that really believe in Make America Great Again or America First, whatever you want to call it. The people that are not the shills, the paid accounts, there's plenty of them on social media. And any person that calls themselves MAGA and also supports Israel, trust me when I tell you, it's very likely they're being compensated in some capacity, especially if they're a big account. If they have a large reach and they are pushing support for Israel, those are people that are likely getting paid by Elon's whatever blue check, system. I purposefully do not pay for a blue check on Twitter. Waste of money. If you know how to get in touch with people, you'll get in touch with them. Blue check is not going to do anything for you in that regard. But there are people who stand to benefit financially in a big way. But I'm telling you right now, I believe this in my heart of hearts. The overwhelming majority of people are not on board with Israel. They are not on board with what they're doing. And they do not want to see us go down this path. So what are we going to do? That's a big question. But I think when we have conversations like we have with Matt Taibbi, and this live stream will get a lot of traction, our clips will get a lot of traction, we are going to continue to put out our message because we are doing this because we believe in something that is not monetarily based. We have a cause, we have a mission that we are fighting towards. We hope that those of you that are here share that sentiment. That's why not only do we have our big crowds every once in a while, 150 live stream viewers at any one time, but we recognize all of you guys in the chat. You know why?
Well, because it's our regular people that get in the chat.
Hold on. It's also people that consistently want to be here because they agree with what we're saying. Not these people that just randomly show up that are, finding an excuse to watch a podcast that may be bashing another podcast or something of that nature. We actually try to do substantive conversations here. And by doing that, we will get somewhere. It takes time, but this is in many ways the issue of our time.
No, Zionism does not come from Judaism. Those are different things. I see what you're saying, and some of what you're saying is accurate in the chat. That is not correct. Zionism doesn't come from Judaism. Zionism uses Judaism. Zionism uses Judaism, and Zionism was secular people that were trying to fit in a place that was full of anti-Semitic people in Europe. And they actually bought into that crowd and thought they were lesser than, and say they needed their own country in order to not feel lesser than, and so that they could be like, taken seriously like the rest of the white people in Europe. These are white European people that are very supremacist, and it has nothing to do with Judaism. They use that in order to facilitate this.
If you liked our conversation this evening, make sure you do get over to patreon.com. And if you think tonight was good with Matt Taibbi, Monday night will be Zach Foster, somebody that Jen has wanted to speak with for a while. He'll finally be coming on. Possibly next Thursday, we will finally have Medea Benjamin. We're working
I
on
haven't
that.
heard back. So that's one of those, this is what I'm telling you. Like, I wouldn't,
We'd like to have her.
We'd like to have her. I'll be on a boat.
Chip, thank you so much for the $5. Zionism is a political project 100 years old. Judaism is a noble religion 3,000 years old. Actually, no. It's, what is it, 6,000 years old? That's
older. Yeah.
Like
and Zionism's a little older, but the point is very valid.
Absolutely. 100%. Always good to see the Shanda show up at
It's a Shanda.
Smash that like button, share, subscribe, do all those things we ask you to do. We love you all. We'll see you Monday.
Free Palestine.